oh, well, you use a code to produce a product called justice. Now, there's no record in recorded history of justice ever being produced by anybody. When you look at what logic tells me has to be the definition for justice, the pure definition, I've looked in several dictionaries, and I particularly didn't care for the definitions that were given to justice. For one thing, the word fair is always associated with justice. And the word fair is also associated with the word white, which means if, that in order to achieve justice, you have to have fairness, and fairness is usually associated with also skin color, like, you say, my fair lady, or, and then you turn right around and at the same time say, treat me fairly. I mean, well, treat you like a fair lady? I mean, what are we talking about? What is that? The two words don't even go together, fair and justice. But in many dictionaries, you'll see the word fair associated with justice, and the word fair is also associated with the word white. See, we have to pay detailed attention to every word in the English language in particular, because every word in the English language, presumably, you assume this, in the system of white supremacy, is designed to support what is already in place, either directly or indirectly. So sometimes you just have to look at a word and say, I'm not accepting that word, so if I use the word, I'm going to use it with a compensatory definition, meaning a definition that will best describe the truth rather than add to what? Confusion. Why? Logically speaking, because the white supremacists thrive off of confusion, and they use words in such a manner as to manifest confusion in every situation that they're in that has to do with their subjects, which are the non-white people of the known universe. That's what white supremacy thrives on. That's a huge part of its strength. So in answer to the question, I mean, this word justice is something we're trying to achieve. So you give it a definition that makes sense and that you can measure it. It's too abstract a way, in my opinion. Now, in the opinion of many others, it may not be. But I've wrestled with that word justice. How do you know when you have it? And, you can say, well, you just know it. Okay, but at least you should have a definition that really helps you to know it and be able to explain it to somebody else and be able to measure it. I mean, right down to the last inch, when you have it and when you don't have it. So about 1994, I heard that I kept asking people, what is the actual definition of the word justice? And I wasn't getting an answer that I was satisfied with. So looking at different dictionaries and whatnot, and then it was on a Larry King TV show, if I recall correctly. Sometimes my memory doesn't serve me correctly, but I think there was a man named Mr. Jerry Spence. I think it was about 1994, and he was being interviewed. And he and Larry King and Mr. Larry Spence, I think, is a lawyer, and they were talking about the word justice. What is the actual definition of the word justice? I immediately perked up because I wanted to hear this. And they said, well, actually, there is no real definition for the word justice, no legal definition. And then later on, I asked a lawyer, I said, what is the word? What is the definition of justice? I mean, so that, people are not just babbling all the time when they're talking about justice, but nobody can agree on what it means. And he said, well, in the Northwestern Hemisphere, in a court of law, justice is whatever the Supreme Court says it is. And I said, is that the legal definition? Say, yeah, that's it. Whatever the Supreme Court says it is. I said, well, the Supreme Court is made up of people, and the people switch around all the time. And I had written something in the code book years before that said, laws change, but justice remains the same. I still believe that. But I didn't have a definition for the word justice. But once I found out that justice is whatever in the Northwestern Hemisphere, in what they call the United States law, under the Constitution, justice is whatever the Supreme Court says it is. So I said, that should be completely unacceptable. There should be a legal definition for the word justice that you can actually measure. So each and every person will know when you got it and when you haven't. So I tried to come up with a compensatory definition, which is a word which is in the title of my book, compensation, which means making up for what's missing. What was missing in this particular case was an acceptable definition for the word justice. So it took me about 8 months. I thought I could do it in a couple of weeks. But, I wrestled with it. So finally I came up with one, a two-part definition. First part, guaranteeing that no person is mistreated. In other words, if you can't guarantee that no person is being mistreated, you don't have justice, all right? Number two, guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. And underline the word constructive. Because a person might say, well, I need some help. You say, well, what kind of help do you need? You say, well, I'm a drug addict and I need another fix. Well, then you look at that and say, wait a minute. If you get another fix as a drug addict and you just add to the drugs that you're already taking and you just add to more drugs, is that constructive?